across the fence, it's St. Patrick's Day, and we're taking a cultural tour of Ireland. Our guide is a longtime UVM Extension farm management specialist. Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. Over the past several years, UVM Extension farm management specialist Dennis Cowpillow has been on several sabbatical studies in Ireland. Dennis has been with us before to talk specifically about agriculture in Ireland, but on this St. Patrick's Day, we've asked Dennis to give us an up-close look at Ireland. Thanks so much for being with us.
Thanks for
and happy St.
inviting
Patrick's
me. Thanks
Day.
for inviting me.
A lot of people may not realize it, but Ireland is part of the European Union.
That's right. Ireland is one of the member nations, has been a member nation for a number of years, and the Republic of Ireland is 26 counties in the southern part of the island, and then the northern part of Ireland is a province of Great Britain. There are 6 counties there. Roughly 4.5 or 5 million people in the Republic, and about a little under 2 million in the north.
That's a lot of people.
It is. It is. And the cities there, Dublin is the big one. There's a couple of million people there. It's just like a big city in the States, and the rural areas are similar to Vermont.
And so there are millions of Americans who can trace their roots to Ireland.
That's right. One of the sources I found said roughly 40 million people in the U.S., 40 million out of the 300 and some odd million, about 12% of Americans can trace their Irish ancestry. The potato famine of 1845 to 1850 was a big problem. Lots of people died. 1 million people died. Roughly 1 million people emigrated. And from 1820 to 1860 or so, roughly 1 million Irish people came to the U.S., lots of them as laborers, hard laborers. But now we've got American politicians, lots of the presidents like to trace their Irish roots, and there's business owners and workers. In the upper corner of that slide there, you can see a little tombstone and an iron gate. That was near the place that I lived most recently in Ireland. It was, the tombstone says, the final resting place of over 3,000 men, women, and children, victims of poverty, famine, cholera, and injustice. It was from a workhouse there. And in the background, you might be able to see a crane that was building the Center for Aerospace Engineering at Carlow Institute of Technology. So the two are superimposed one on the other. It's fascinating.
There seems to be a lot of emphasis in Ireland about celebrating its history.
Oh, there is, Judy, you're right. And part of the reason is there's so much history there, and it's so obvious. One of the fascinating places that I went to was a place called the KG Fields. It's a national monument. It's over on the left of the screen. It's roughly 3,000 years old. And what's funny is there's Stone Age farm fields. You can see a stone wall there, and it's the oldest known field system in the world. And they're studying the fields there and the sizes and the shapes and the pollen that's in there to get an idea of the crops that people grew, the pastures that people raised, the animals that they raised. And normally stone walls have a tendency to move over time, that you have a field or a set of fields and you want this one a little bit bigger, so you move the wall. Or this one, in this case, it hasn't moved for 3,000 years, so they can study it.
That's incredible.
Yeah, and then there's ring forts that were there on the slides also, that were family security places. And in the center is the Hill of Tara, one of the famous places. You hear the name Tara in the States, and it goes back to this Hill of Tara. Down the bottom there's the Bogman's Arm, and they found human remains in the bogs, and the tannins in the water preserve the skin and bone, so it almost looks like leather, and they're really, really interesting to see these bogmen in the museums.
It's a little creepy. Talk a little bit more about the large stone structures from long ago, because there are lots of those as well.
There are. In the center you can see an Ogham stone, which is ancient writing. It's some kind of a memorial stone this one here is roughly 3,000 years old. And there's a number of Ogham stones all around Europe from the Celtic people. And the Celtic people started in Central Europe and then spread around, and they wound up in Ireland. On the right-hand side, you can see a couple of dolmen, and you can see how huge some of these things are. And they're a type of a tomb. And then down in the left, there's a little gold boat that really has caught my attention. It's about 2,000 years old, and it's about 7 inches long. And it was found in a farm field while people were plowing. and there's benches, oarlocks, rows of oars, a paddle rudder, a yard arm, and a mast. And to think that that thing is 4,000 years old and they found it and it's there in a museum, it got stuck in my head. Yeah, a little gold boat.
Interesting.
Yeah.
So, of course, everyone has heard of St. Patrick.
Right. St. Patrick was a Roman Briton, and he apparently was sold as a slave to an Irish farm family, and he escaped, went back to Britain, and then returned to Ireland as a missionary. What's odd is that Ireland wasn't conquered by the Romans, so the Celtic influence stayed on without being superimposed by the Roman influence, and then Christianity came. St. Patrick brought Christianity in, and it was the Christian monasteries that actually created the towns in Ireland, that the monastic villages, the church settlements there, would be a couple of thousand people there for trade and to allow people, scribes, to write out the Bible. Mm-hmm. And it took a lot of people to do that. The round towers there you can see in the picture are from a National Historic Site, Glendalough, which was built around 700 AD. And the place had around 1,000 people living in this beautiful valley of two lakes in the wintertime. And then in the summer, there'd be about 10,000 people. People would come to have their marriages blessed, or to have children baptized, or to come and do serve a jail sentence, and by helping the monks there. Mm-hmm. Fascinating, fascinating place. Beautiful, Glendalough.
So is St. Patrick's Day celebrated the same way in Ireland as it is here in the States?
There's a big St. Patrick's Day parade that I've never attended in Dublin, but apparently the Patrick's Day parade in New York is even bigger. And there aren't any green rivers running in Ireland and stuff like that, but it's a big festival. It's a national holiday. The banks are closed, mm-hmm. but all in celebration of St. Patrick, that's right.
So Celtic crosses are also a symbol that many people see. Right.
The one in the picture here is roughly 700 years old, from Monaster Boyce in a little bit north of Dublin, and below it you can see some figures carved in the stone. Over on the left are I can't remember. There's Cain and Abel and Adam and Eve. Mm-hmm. I guess Adam and Eve are on the left with an apple, and Cain and Abel with a stick on the right. Mm-hmm. But people at that time in 700 AD were illiterate, so they carved Bible stories on the stones as an educational tool.
Interesting.
And then over on the right is the Book of Kells, and that's in Trinity College in Dublin, which is from around 800 AD, a so-called illuminated manuscript where the monks would write out the Bible on parchment, which is leather, and then they would also put in these incredible designs. And it was really amusing to be in Dublin in Trinity College, lined up at 9:30 in the morning, and there'd be hundreds of people in line waiting for the museum to open, so all these tourists could look at a Bible that was written in 800 AD. It was really funny.
Incredible. So when did the Vikings land in Ireland?
The Vikings came just before 800 AD, mm-hmm. and they came for trade, and they first raided monasteries because of the silver and gold and valuable stuff that was there, including slaves. And the Irish, or the Vikings, developed towns. You can see the red dots around mm-hmm. the outside: Dublin, Galway, Limerick, Belfast, and such. They developed these towns as ports, so for their boats would go up the rivers, get stuff, mm-hmm. bring them down to the port, collect it, and then the larger boats would take them around the world for trade.
So who built all the castles that are found all over Ireland?
The Normans did. Mm-hmm. And the Normans were the earliest ones. They came from France and Britain. One of the Irish kings invited Henry II to send men to help settle a feud. The knights that were sent liked what they saw, and so they took the land. And then, in order to protect themselves, they started building castles. Nothing like that had existed in Ireland before. And the knights that came had armor, and they had lances and stuff, which was technology that the native Irish didn't have, so they got the good land.
What amazes me is that those structures are still standing.
Right. A lot of them have fallen into ruin, but a lot of them are museums. Some of them are still habitable. People live in them, families live in them, and some are museums and some are just empty.
And so when did the British come to Ireland?
The British came in the mid-1500s. Henry VIII came over. He built more castles and took more land. He brought Protestant settlers and gave them the land. And in the 1600s, these were called plantations. And what's interesting is that there were plantations in Ireland of Protestants sent over. And that's the same time as Jamestown in Virginia in the U.S., that the British sent plantations over here too. So there's some similarities in the background of the history there.
Now, Ireland also has a rich literary heritage, including James Joyce, who's considered one of the most influential writers in the 20th century.
That's right. There's a number of poets and playwrights and authors from Ireland or with Irish background. And these are just a few of them listed there, yeah.
And what about music?
Lots and lots of Irish music. The U2 on the slide there is one of the real famous ones. Carolyn was a blind Irish harper. The Chieftains made a big splash with traditional Irish music. There's an international Irish traditional music organization called Ceoltas, and I find it interesting to listen to Irish radio on rte.ie.
So tourism is also important to Ireland today, including Americans who visit there.
That's right. There's roughly 1 million Americans visit Ireland for touring during a good year. And then there's also many American companies that are in Ireland. The Ford plant in 1917 was about the first U.S. corporation set up in Ireland. American corporations find it very easy to be in Ireland because they've got skilled employees that are educated, that speak English, and it's a toehold into the whole European market. Over on the right, you can see a number of logos of different U.S. corporations that are there: Dell, 3M, Facebook, Google. And just recently, Apple came up with a plan to invest nearly $1 billion for a data center, online music, and an app store there.
That's amazing. That's a lot of money.
Oh, it's a lot of money. And they figured around 100 permanent jobs there in a small area in Ireland that needs jobs.
And so what advice would you have for people who are maybe thinking about a trip to Ireland?
For me, I like to go to the Irish Heritage Site, Bord Fáilte, and if you check the museums in Ireland, that there's museums and historical places all around the whole country that are fascinating. In this picture, there's a picture of me in front of Newgrange. When I was last year, I talked about Newgrange Passage Tomb that's lined up for the winter solstice. In the middle there is Titanic Belfast. The ship Titanic was built in the dockyards of Belfast, and this shiny museum there is on that site. You go in and you take a little pod ride around the place as they're building the ship. It's very interesting, yeah. And
so anything else you'd like to share with our viewers today about Ireland?
If we could go back to that last picture, there's a picture of some fiddlers there. There's a lot of different arts festivals in different towns where there's musicians and Shakespeare plays, and then in the lower right-hand corner there's parades with these huge puppets that are a lot of fun. In the center bottom there's Yeats's grave, and then over on the left there's a Christmas scene from Galway, and you might be able to see a round tower in it and the city wall, the medieval city wall, and they built a shopping mall around this thing, and it's all decorated in Christmas lights. It's really interesting how they address their history but keep it and bring it anew as well.
That's amazing. Well, thanks you for taking us on that tour.
Thank you for the invitation.
Hopefully someday I'll be able to get a chance to go there myself.
Happy St. Patrick's Day. Thanks.
Same to you. That's our program for today. Thanks for joining us. I'm Judy Simpson. We'll see you again next time on Across the Fence.